This happened years ago, but still affects me to this day. The summer after I graduated high school, I was still living at home. I was up late one night and was packing for a camping trip with my friends. I was unbelievably hot and had the windows open as I sat and folded clothes. It was around 2 in the morning, and the next thing I knew, there was a hand coming through the gap in the screen of my window. I screamed and the hand flew back. I was stunned, but there was a part of me that wondered if it was my younger brother pranking me. I got up and looked out the window and just saw the figure of a man staring back at me. I ran into my brother's room and he was there playing video games. We called the police, who came and searched the area. They found nothing, warned me and my parents to lock the windows and doors, and left. We were all still shaken up, and my mom had a feeling that he would come back. It turns out her mother's intuition was right. She went outside and waited on our back porch. After 20 minutes or so, she saw a man, dressed in black, slink into our backyard along the tree line. There wasn't a fence on that side, unfortunately. He hid behind a tree for a few seconds and ran to another tree and hid there, slowly working his way towards my house. My mother yelled something to him and he took off running. The police came back out and, again, found no trace of him. I never opened that window again, not even the curtains. My parents installed some motion detecting lights, and that seemed to be the end of that. About 6 months later, my friend and I got an apartment downtown together. We were really excited as this was our first place on our own. The apartment wasn't exactly the best quality, but it was so fun to be living in the city. The downside was that it was street parking only. After a few weeks, my car was broken into. Nothing was taken, but a single rose sat on the passenger seat. It was creepy, but I vowed to be vigilant and safe. I always tried to park close to the entrance near the lights, but often it was difficult to get those spots, and I would often have to park farther away on darker streets. Things quickly began escalating at this point. My car was broken into at least once a week. Most of the time, a flower was left, which I always threw on the ground, but once a pair of men's underwear was left, and even more creepily, once a bag of Tootsie Rolls, as they were my favorite candy. This made me wonder if the person knew me personally, and I started to become suspicious of everyone. There was a laundry in the basement of the apartment, and one day I went down to get a load that finished drying. As I started folding, I realized all of my undergarments, bras, and underwear were gone. Another week, I had a male friend over from school and his tires got slashed during the visit. By the time the first letter arrived, I had already started making plans to move elsewhere. The letter described a love for me that had been going on for years. He noted things that proved he had been watching me closely. I arranged for another friend to take over my lease, and I moved in with another friend on the other side of the city. It was a secured building and had an underground parking garage that was only accessible to tenants. I felt much more secure, and the extra money spent was well worth the peace of mind. Things were quiet for a few months, and then my roommate got a boyfriend. Most of us were wary of Ashley's new boyfriend from the beginning. For one, they met on MySpace after he reached out to her. Another reason was that new boyfriend Matt was extremely good looking, and while Ashley was a wonderful person, she wasn't the type you would typically expect someone like him to date. Ashley was thrilled. She had never had a boyfriend and really felt like he was her Prince Charming. I thought he was weird and creepy from the beginning. Matt was on the quiet side and always seemed to be sporting an uncomfortable, leering smile. It was difficult to carry on any sort of conversation with him because he would always make it weird with some random facts that were completely unrelated to what we were talking about. I had deleted my MySpace when the initial stalking began, but I created a dummy account to learn more about Matt. It didn't look like he really knew any of his friends in real life. They were only pictures of himself, and the rest of the information was vague. My friends and I gently tried to discourage her from seeing Matt. He technically hadn't done anything wrong, but he was just so strange. She would immediately get defensive and would shut the conversation down. Matt started to spend more time at the apartment, and I found myself finding any excuse I could to avoid coming home. One day I came home from work and found Matt on my couch, alone, drinking a beer. Ashley had been called into work and told him he could just hang out. I was furious because I didn't want to spend any time with him, so I grabbed a beer and a snack and headed off to my room and shut the door. About 30 minutes or so, he knocked on my door and suggested we watch some TV and get to know each other better because we both loved Ashley. I didn't want to, but decided that maybe I needed to give it a try. He put on a movie and I just tried to focus on the movie because I didn't want to talk. At one point, I glanced over to Matt and he was staring at me with a smile on his face. I snapped a what at him, and he just continued smiling and said, "I just can't believe it." "Believe what?" I asked. He said nothing and went back to watching the movie, still smiling. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the interaction had every hair standing up on my body. I excused myself and locked the door to my room. Another month or so went on, and I had managed to avoid being home for much, if anything, beyond sleep and showering. Matt practically lived there and had even brought a bunch of his things into Ashley's room. I really didn't want to move again, but it was okay to look for other options. On their 6-month anniversary, I saw a huge bouquet of flowers on the table and an already opened card propped up next to it. I rolled my eyes and was about to leave when I decided to see what that weirdo wrote to her. When I opened the card, my heart started beating through my chest. Without even reading the words he wrote, I was shaken. The writing was exactly the same as my stalker had sent. I had kept them as evidence and dug them out of my desk for comparison. The handwriting was unique and identical. Matt was the stalker. I called the police first. As they were on the way, I called Ashley and asked her to come over. She was at work but said she would be there when she could. I was terrified to tell her because I knew she would be shattered. The police took a statement from me and actually went to Ashley's work to get more information from her, and they ended up breaking the news. Apparently, Ashley called Matt and left a furious message even though the cops told her not to say anything, and he completely disappeared after that. There was no Matt or anyone matching his resemblance at the place he said he worked. Ashley had never been to his apartment because he said that he was staying with friends while trying to save money for a trip to Europe. His family lived out of state and she had never met a friend of his because he said that they had a falling out because he was choosing to spend so much time with Ashley. It was all lies, and in the end, she was dating a stranger. We don't even know if Matt was his real name. The cherry on the top of this whole thing was when we went through Matt's things. He had left everything when he disappeared, and Ashley and I decided to go through everything. There was a duffel bag that was full of gym clothes, but in one of the compartments there was about 10 pictures of me. All were taken from far away with the exception of one of me sleeping. The sheets were current, so I know it had to have been at the current apartment before I started locking my bedroom door. A few pictures dated back to before the incident at my parents' house, which made us think that was him as well. 2 pairs of missing underwear was there, and I shuddered to think of what he did with the rest. A Starbucks lid with my red lipstick marks, a necklace I hadn't even noticed missing, a few random sick souvenirs. The police never tracked him down. I decided to accept an opportunity overseas that I had been considering and got out of there. Unfortunately, Ashley and I quickly drifted apart. She had a really hard time accepting that her first love was a complete psycho. I think I had some underlying anger, maybe misplaced, for believing all of his lies and letting him into our lives. I don't know what his endgame was. Would he have tried to hurt me? Or was he simply content with being in my world? I'll never know. Being stalked changes you. Even when I lived across the world, I looked over my shoulder everywhere I went. I still have no social media accounts attached to my real name. I am married with children and know that he moved on to torment some other poor woman. But every time I visit my home, I am tense and keep a low profile. Part of me will always worry that Matt will resurface again. I worked as a flight attendant for years, and when I decided to take an extended sabbatical from college, there were a handful of let's not meet situations I encountered, but one in particular still makes my skin crawl more than any. I was born and raised in Texas, but had to move to New York when I was 21, so when I found out at the beginning of a week-long trip that I'd have a couple of overnights in Austin, I was super excited to go to my home state for a few days. My brother lived just north of the city, and we planned to hang out and go to dinner the night I arrived when he got off of work, and the following day we were going to meet up with our dad, who lived about an hour away. So I get to the hotel downtown, the crew and I check in, and then we each head off to our rooms. Short elevator ride and I get to mine, where not even 5 minutes later there's a loud, hard knock on the door. It was only around 1 or 2 p.m., and I hadn't called either my dad or brother to let them know I was in town yet, so they wouldn't know what room. I assumed it was maybe one of my crewmates, so I headed to the door. Before even making it to the door, however, a loud male voice on the other side boomed. "The front desk sent me about the bathroom problem you called in." Before trying to open the door, "Unlock the door and open, miss. I need in now." I froze in my tracks. I hadn't even been in the bathroom yet, let alone called anything to the front desk. I'm a petite chick, and while I take nothing from anyone despite my size, I still err on the side of caution. Slowly inching toward the door to look out the peephole, all I could tell was that the man on the other side was at least 6 foot tall and easily double my weight. No way was I going to unlock the door. I responded to the guy, telling him he must have had the wrong room. He continued pounding on the door while constantly turning the handle, telling me no, he needed in and was getting in the room one way or another. I panicked, but thankfully had the sense to grab the phone and call the front desk. The concierge confirmed that they had neither sent anyone up to my room, nor had they received a call about the bathroom. The entire time, this guy was still determined to get in my room, pounding and yelling. Luckily for me, the front desk had dispatched security to my floor. When the security officers step off the elevator a few seconds later, I can hear them in the hall approach and ask the guy who he was, what he was doing, and telling him he needed to leave the hotel. He immediately gets hostile and aggressive towards them, and the front desk clerk I'm still on the phone with tells me police have been called and are on their way. In the meantime, I'm trapped in my room, scared out of my mind. Long story short, the cops show up pretty quickly and manage to arrest the guy for trespassing and criminal menacing or something. I later found out that the guy was also wanted in connection to a string of break-ins and violent acts against people in Austin. He had seen and stalked me from the minute I entered the hotel lobby. Apparently, I was exactly his type of victim. Nothing else happened after that, but it still rattled the crap out of me for the rest of my stay in that hotel. About 2 years ago, I worked at a movie store inside a mall. I've had tons of strange experiences with customers, but this one definitely tops them off. I was 20 at the time. This guy was over 6 foot, late 40s, very hefty, and always had this weird zombified expression on his face. He came in about once a week. One of my coworkers had even warned me about him, how he was a little off, but I still treated him with as much respect as I did everyone else. One day he came in and we talked for a bit, but it got a little awkward and I kept trying to end the conversation and looked busy by tagging items behind the counter. He stood there in silence, watching me for about 20 minutes and finally left. A few days later, he comes back in and walks up to me holding a large container. He says, "I made 4 pounds of enchiladas at home today, just for you. I remember you like Mexican food." I don't remember at all telling him that I liked it, but I do know that I went to the Mexican restaurant across the way every lunch break. I just politely accepted it and put it in the back office. I wasn't quite convinced he didn't use some foreign substance for it. Another few days later, he came back in and had a drawing for me of a dragon. Now, I love dragons, but I never told him that. This drawing looked like it took hours to make, and at this point I was a little freaked out. I had him leave it on the counter so I could just throw it away later. Later on, I was given about a week vacation. During that week, I cut my hair about 12 inches. The day I came back, I got a shift with my manager. I told her all about the guy, and immediately she was weirded out for me. Of course, a few minutes later, I see the dude walking around in the mall. He was going towards the exit and didn't look at me once. My manager tells me to go to the back office. I go and wait until she comes to get me, and when she does, she tells me I need to make a report to mall security immediately. Apparently, when I ran back there, he turned around to come in and walked all throughout the store. When she asked him if he needed help with something, he said, "I can't believe she's cut her hair." and briskly walked out. I go to the mall security to make a report, and we went through all these videos from the cameras of when the guy came to visit me, but there was one video that really stood out. It still sends chills throughout my body just thinking about it. The video shows him pulling into the parking lot of the mall, and about 3 minutes later, I arrive. This was really early in the morning and no customers were here yet, but there were cars in the lot. I didn't notice him at all. It shows me walking towards the entrance and him following. Right as I open the entrance door, the man starts sprinting towards me. I walked inside just in time. It shows him stop and just stand in front of the door, watching me through the glass walk a little further away. He begins walking normally inside the mall. I never noticed him behind me, and that part really messed me up. It was like watching the last footage before a kidnapping happens on Dateline or something. The video gave the security reason to ban him from the mall, and thankfully they did. They later told me when they gave him a background check, he had 4 counts of promiscuous images of underagers on his person and was on probation. Years ago, I started dating a guy. I just came out of a bad relationship and got attached to him way too quickly, but everything seemed to be going well. That's until he started to take up all my free time. He would wait for me after school, spend the evening with me, and often ask to sleep at my place. Sometimes he would even text me late at night that he was outside and wanted me to let him in. I often did, me, the kid, madly in love. Skip 3 months later. We've been dating for half a year now. I'm 15, he's 17, and he asked me to marry him. I'm shocked, but a 15-year-old me says yes. I regretted that decision pretty fast. First, it meant nothing really. We were way too young, and second, he took even more of my time. Skip 2 months to summer vacation. He's been basically living at my place for a week straight now. I realized how tired of him I was. I wouldn't even talk to my friends anymore, just him. So we talked. I didn't want to break up, scared to hurt him. He said he would be better. Surprise, surprise, he wasn't. During the next 4 months, it was on and off. I would dump him, but take him back shortly after. Why, you might ask? Well, he kept telling me he was going to hurt himself if I left. I felt trapped. Finally, after I found out he sent me a self-harm picture from Google Images and claimed it as his own, I ended it for good, or so I thought. He started texting me endlessly, so I blocked him. I also blocked his friends too when they started to try and make me feel bad. I had about a month of peace. I started seeing him in the bus to my school very often. I assumed it was a coincidence. After all, our schools were pretty close to each other, but it was just the beginning. I started seeing him more and more, walking behind me or sitting at the table next to me. He never talked. He just watched. One day, I got tired and confronted him. He denied, of course, but I got peace for a couple of days, and that's when the worst happened. At the time, I lived in an apartment building on the 3rd floor, but just under my window were the emergency stairs. From there, you could see into my room if I didn't have curtains. I often used it to leave my house during the night, and my ex knew about it. He used to come to my place late at night so my parents wouldn't know. Around 2 a.m., I woke up and I thought I heard something. I got up and looked around. I figured it must have been my imagination, but then I heard a metallic noise. I rushed to the window and that's when I saw him, my ex, running down the metal stairs. I was panicked and I woke up my parents. My dad got really angry and called my ex's house. He explained the situation to his mom and hung up. I still cross paths with my ex since we live in the same part of town, but he avoids me now. I've had peace ever since. This story happened last year during my vacation at Malolo City, Philippines. Yes, I am Filipino, and there are a lot of drunken, creepy encounters here too. It's always dangerous for young girls to be walking alone at night, and you can see that in the news that often report all sorts of terrible things almost daily. I didn't know that I myself would have a similar scary experience as many of the girls have had, simply because I myself am a 20-year-old male. It happened one night right around 1 a.m. I was suffering depression at the time and thought of having a walk outside. The girl that I was trying to win over just rejected me hard, and I felt bummed out about it, so I went out to listen to some sad tunes. While walking the outskirts of a town called San Isabel, I saw this big blackish SUV loudly driving behind me while blasting its own tunes. I was paying no mind to it at first, but then the SUV suddenly slowed down behind me and went silent. As I walked, I can see the SUV tailing behind me. Then it started to blink its headlights, as if it's trying to catch my attention. I stopped and looked behind me again, and saw these two guys inside. I remember them as being at most in their early 40s. They were creepily grinning and waving their hands at me while laughing. I thought these guys were just messing around, so I just ignored them and went my way. Unfortunately, they didn't stop. They continued following me and blinking their headlights at me. But now, their evil laughter was mixed with whistles and catcalling. They yelled words like love and babe at me. The thing is, harassment is common here in the Philippines, just like any other country in the world. But a male being harassed is almost unheard of here, unless you are in a prison, of course. There are some cases of it happening, but the public mostly dismisses it. Filipino society is biased towards girls when it comes to these types of crimes. If you're a guy and you got yourself into this, as a macho guapo Filipino, all you can do is to nut up and stop acting like a little baby. So at the time, I thought they may have mistaken me for a girl. I did have a slender and petite frame, and I was wearing a pinkish hoodie jacket and very tight jeans. So what I did was I took off my hood and glared at them to show them my face and that I was a guy. That again didn't stop them. In fact, they started to make ow and nice sounds at me. The driver was the scariest of the two, looking at me directly in the eyes and smiling, doing those pabebe or cute guy next door faces, but way creepier and scary. Undeterred, I stood my ground without even thinking and rolled up my hoodie shirt. I showed them my tummy and my chest just to prove I was not a girl. I yelled at them, "Idiots, I'm not a girl." That was a big mistake. This only aroused them even more. They started cheering and licking their teeth at me like I was some stripper. Embarrassed and very angry, I yelled at them again for their stupidity and raised my fists at them, asking for a fight. Like I said, I was suffering from being depressed at the time, so my cognitive functions weren't working that well, and these guys were just making my lonely night even worse. Another big mistake. I should have known from the start that those creeps didn't care if I was a boy or a girl. The driver eyed me for half a minute before opening the door and getting out of his car. That was where I saw for the first time, illuminated by his car headlights, of his bright red eyes and woozy and unbalanced stance. It was evident that he was out of his mind. He stood next to his car, pulled away the bottom of his t-shirt. There I saw that the guy had a pistol tucked in his pants. He smiled as he watched my reaction. My feelings of bravery was drained from me. There were some awful things that happened in the Philippines at that time with the war on drugs and all, so there were many cases of people being gunned down in the street. I was speechless when he showed it to me. The other guy inside was giggling with excitement and staring at me. Even with fear crawling over me, I took several deep breaths and opened my mouth again, asking, "Buddy, what do you want from me?" If they were just looking to get my cash, I would gladly give it to them. If they were looking to hurt me for amusement, my God, please no. The driver, with his eyes still on me, said in a low, soothing voice, You're the one I want. You're the one I've been looking for, handsome." I was scared near to death as they talked to me. I couldn't believe that I am really deep in this situation. Even with fear seizing my whole body, I managed to give a little chuckle at how corny their replies were. They too started to laugh. I just shook my head and without second thought, bolted off as fast as I can. I took to the darker and narrower streets, places I'm sure that they couldn't chase me with their car. As they ran, I didn't know if they went on pursuit, but I can still hear them laughing and laughing in the night. I arrived home and went straight to my bed. I just laid there scared, vigilant, and listening to any sounds of SUVs outside. It took me till morning before I was finally at ease to fall asleep. It was unfortunate I didn't memorize their plate numbers. While that memory is still in my head, the feeling of fear now is gone and replaced with curiosity and disbelief. I tried to ask a opinions from my friends about my experience, but even they didn't know what to think of it. The only thing they could do was to comfort me for my misfortune. However, here in this community, it felt great to be able to share it with people who have also suffered these experiences. Around first grade, I became friends with this kid named Stan. He was a couple of years older than I was, but he had a sister that was my age who I was also friends with. I also had a wicked crush on their oldest brother, James. I was that girl who chased the poor, uninterested boys all around the playground. I lost contact with all three around middle school. Of course, when Facebook happened, I began getting in touch with people I'd gone to school with. It was a moderately sized K through 8th school, so you were basically with the exact same group of kids through each grade. This makes for some pretty strong bonds, I believe, because there's a lot of us who kept in contact after moving on to high school for a little while before drifting apart. Because of this, I was always really excited when I got back in touch with those people. However, not all of those connections have been positive. I got a friend request from Stan one day under a different name. The messages were the typical, "How's it going? What have you been up to?" Then he started sending messages that were about my looks. They weren't obscene, but they did make me a bit uncomfortable. He started pushing me to meet up. I can't explain it, but I just had a really off feeling about him, so I would kind of avoid making any kind of plans. He continued to be pushy about things, and finally I just stopped responding to his messages. I should also mention here that when I first accepted Stan's friend requests, he literally went through every single one of my pictures and liked them. That should have been my first clue, but I just let it go. Then I started getting messages from friends and even some family members asking me about him. Stan was going through and basically sending everyone friend requests. By this point, I'm like, alright, this is weird. But things got really nuts when my cousin informed me that Stan not only tried to friend her, he'd also sent her a message asking all sorts of questions about me, such as things I liked or places I liked to go. My cousin was concerned that he was sending those kind of messages to other people who might actually tell him what he wanted to know. I debated sending Stan a message telling him to back off, but decided to just block him and change all of my Facebook settings to make it as private as I possibly could. I also sent out a mass message to all of my friends and family informing them of the situation to kindly not give out any personal information. I had been friends with James but ended up blocking him as well just to prevent Stan from getting access to anything. Things were quiet for about a week. Then friend requests from random accounts started coming in. Some didn't have pictures, some had random images. They were accompanied by messages that made it clear that they were all from Stan, full of skeezy comments on my looks and how he wanted to hook up. That's putting it mildly. Every day I had an account that needed to be blocked. I contacted Facebook about the situation, though they didn't really offer any kind of help. It finally came to a stop when I threatened Stan with police intervention. The peace lasted for about a year. Then I got a friend request from a girl I'd also gone to school with named Kelsey. We talked pretty frequently both online and over the phone. She wanted us to hang out, so we talked about that some, but then she started bringing it up more frequently, persistently. I started to get that weird feeling again that something wasn't quite right. Then came the bombshell. Kelsey and Stan were dating. We'd all been in the same classes, so the fact that they knew each other wasn't strange, but for them to be dating. I confronted Kelsey about it and blocked her, but because we talked on the phone, they had my phone number. Of course, both began calling and texting crazy things nonstop. I finally had to get my number changed. It had been over 10 years since all of this, and I haven't heard from Stan once. Kelsey did try to friend me recently with a different account, and I looked through her Facebook, showing that she's married to another man and no evidence of Stan. I'm not taking any chances, though, so she's been blocked permanently. This story occurred about 10 years ago. I was around 20 years old at the time. I had been working, I still work here, at a little ma-and-pa health food store in Virginia for a few months. A truly lovely, tight-knit staff with an owner who was basically a mother to me. The other older ladies were my best friends and more aunt-like than anything. Of course, being the youngest lady working here, I got lots of hours and ended up closing shop many nights. Soon, I was comfortable enough to be closing by myself. We had a regular customer that had been coming in for quite a few years before I started there. He was a local holistic doctor, a brilliant one at that. He was around 40 years of age, divorced, and well-to-do. He spent a ton of money at the shop, sometimes taking an entire car full of groceries home. Needless to say, the owner was pleased to have his business. The first time I met him, he said, "Well, hello there. I'm Dr. Malloy. I don't think we've ever met." He stuck out his hand and displayed a charming smile. I will admit he was quite handsome, very nice, and funny. My coworker Pam stood a little to the side, and she sort of gave me that look that said, be careful with this one. Sort of a sixth sense that she had going on. She was, and still is, very protective of me. She said, "Oh yes, this is Diana. She just started here." He replied, "Well, nice to meet you, Diana. I'm sure it's nice to have some young blood around here." He took his sweet time and chit-chatted about what he did, how successful he was, and how he will be coming in more often to see my pretty face. He made sure my coworker didn't hear that part. So, fast forward a few more months, and this guy had been coming in almost nightly, specifically when he knew I'd be there alone. Basically right at closing, which would annoy the crap out of me, but I was too nice and knew we needed the business. Then began the usual inappropriate questions. How old are you? Where do you live? You must have a boyfriend. If you ever need anything, help with your health, or if you need any guidance, I can be of service. I also have a home office. I always answered very vaguely, and I never told him where I lived. One Thanksgiving, he asked if I was a good cook and if I would mind coming over and cooking a turkey for him. No. At this point, I informed my boyfriend Jackson, now husband, that this guy is creeping me out. I told him he would likely be in the store on Friday night, and if he could please come in to keep me company while I began to close. My boyfriend comes in. Not a few minutes later, Dr. Malloy comes in and looks stunned when he sees my boyfriend. I look at my boyfriend and nod. Dr. Malloy says, "Hey, buddy," in a condescending tone, of course. His whole demeanor had changed, and his eyes are dead holes and fixed on me like I had betrayed him. The boyfriend is leaning over the counter as Dr. Malloy is piling stuff on quickly and silently. I should mention my boyfriend is 6'7", scruffy bearded mountain of a man, and he's wearing his cycling clothes. Dr. Malloy checks out and says, "See you soon," ignores my boyfriend and leaves, winking at me. The boyfriend is noticeably angry, and he watches Dr. Malloy go out into his car. The next day, Dr. Malloy confronts me about the boyfriend. "Was that him? Your boyfriend? He's a real bro, huh?" Snarky and pompous, and I respond, "Yeah, he's actually really wonderful." Now Jackson starts staying with me to close whenever he can. Dr. Malloy starts waiting for me to go on break and follows me, trying to eat with me at the cafe nearby. The ladies are getting very annoyed and I start hiding. All that stuff. Well, I get a pretty bad rib injury on my bike and stay home. I live in a very secluded old apartment a 15-minute walk away that sits above an old art gallery. That day, my friend Vojtek was visiting from Germany. I was so excited to see my best friend. He brought me food and coffee, and we were just chilling inside catching up when, knock, knock, knock. "You who? Anybody home?" I recognized the voice. I opened it, and it's Dr. Malloy holding a large suitcase. "I heard you were injured. I brought my acupuncture supplies, and I'd like to gift you with a session." He tries to walk in. My friend is baffled, and I say, well, no thanks. My friend is visiting, and he's here taking care of me." He looks at my friend, and his eyes were filled with rage. "I came all this way here for you. This is what I get? Oh, you have 2 boyfriends. Disgusting." At this point, Vojtek steps between us, tells him to leave, and shuts the door. Dr. Malloy bangs on the door, cussing and flipping out on us. He leaves. I told the ladies and my boyfriend. My boyfriend is enraged and wants to go beat this guy up, but things calm down for a bit and Dr. Malloy goes away for a minute. But now his roommate starts scouting me out for him, asking me if I'd like to come over for dinner to their place and have fun, that Dr. Malloy misses me. I'm angry and tell them to buzz off. This friend of his just wasn't right. Now D-Day. Dr. Malloy waits in front of the store as I leave for break. My boyfriend is on his way to take me out. Dr. Malloy stops me and says, "I'm taking you." "No, I'm going to eat with my boyfriend. Please leave me alone, man. Just stop." "No, I'm taking you to Montana. Get in my car, leave your boyfriend. I can take care of you for the rest of your life. I need a wife. I know you love me. Don't lie to me." He's saying all of this through his teeth, quietly and angrily. He's holding onto my wrist and trying to drag me away when Pam busts the door open, screaming and pulling his shoulders. Dr. Malloy grabs my hair, basically ripping it out of my head. Then my other hero, Jackson, runs over and tackles this idiot and puts him in a headlock. Everyone yelling and losing it. I'm silent and in shock. Police are called. He's arrested and in cuffs. The last thing he says, "You're mine." Restraining order ensues. I didn't press charges. We were about to move anyhow, and I knew I was protected at work. Last I heard, he did move to Montana. He closed his business and left. So, to the naturopath and psychopath who stalked me and possibly tried to kidnap me, I hope we never meet again. Although throughout the years my husband has collected a few shotguns he'd love to show you. When I was 14, I lived down the street from a Walgreens and would walk there to buy candy or makeup maybe once or twice per week after school. It was less than a 10-minute walk and I mostly felt safe, although at that age we all feel invincible. One day, standing in line waiting to pay for my goods, I felt something tickle my back. I've always had long hair and figured it was a random loose strand, so I just ignored it. Then the random tickle turned into something solid, and I felt a grip on my bra. Like full-on something is holding the backstrap hooks of my bra in their hand. I made a noise, rushed forward, nearly bumping into the person in front of me, and turned around to see a dude standing behind me. I started to ask what was going on, but he cut me off and said, "Someone is supposed to teach you how to use those things." I was super confused, so I naturally said, "Huh? Your bra? Don't you have someone to teach you how to put those things on?" I reached back and felt my bra was above the back of my shirt, and apparently the hooks weren't fully aligned. It was a 3-hook bra, and I guess I had only hooked 2 of them off center or something, but I was still confused. "Okay," I said, super creeped out at this point. "Well, you're walking around like a dog in heat. At least fix your bra or let me do it for you." Okie doke. I faced forward and ignored him, paid for my candy and lip gloss, and then left. Halfway to my house, a car pulled up beside me, and lo and behold, it's him. "Hop in, I'll give you a ride," he called out from the passenger window. "I'm good, thanks. I'm almost home," I said back while speeding up my pace. "No, come on, it's okay," he called back, and at this point, he sort of pulled up and angled his car so that he was nearly on the sidewalk. No thanks," I yelled back at him before running to the other side of the street. I kept my walking pace, but I was freaking out. I heard his engine rev behind me, turned to see his car coming towards me on the wrong side of the road, and I just ran till I reached my house. Probably not smart, but I ran inside and locked the doors and screamed for my older brother that some creeper was outside trying to get me in their car. My brother ran out and the dude took off, thankfully, and I didn't walk the Walgreens again. So yeah, creepy dude who grabbed me on my actual bra and then tried to get me in your car, let's not meet. Like ever. And also person standing behind creeper dude, you suck for not helping a 14-year-old girl getting her bra pulled on by some old, disgusting man. His name was, for the sake of the story, Levi, and he was 16. I was 12, maybe a bit younger at the time. This was prior to my family moving from our hometown to the current small town my parents now reside in. Our hometown was, as I called it, a Bible Belt with almost 10 different churches, and we belonged to one of them. As such, Christian youth groups were common, and being sheltered during my childhood made that the only place I could socialize. But like every town, there was the group of non-Christians and kids from troubled homes that, when needing stability, would come to the youth groups. That's how I met Levi. a friend of an acquaintance who came on occasion to my youth group. It was Valentine's Day and we were making chocolate hearts for people. I, being heavily influenced by my religion at the time, thought of being a good Samaritan and visited with Levi that night to be friendly. I even shared my chocolate with him when there wasn't enough. But that apparently gave him the idea, as I'd later learn, that he thought I flirted with him. Levi was way taller than me. I was in the awkward puberty phase most kids go through, and still was only 5'3". He was almost 6 feet, and while scrawny and sorta pimpled, he was by far stronger than me. So yeah, you can imagine my shock when he showed up at my house a few days later and asked for me. Turns out that the acquaintance had given him my address and encouraged him to go see me because he, quote-unquote, had a crush on me. So from my strung-together memories, I humored him and let him stay over. My parents, though, stayed in close proximity, which I was thankful for in the end. Truth be told, while back then I was boy crazy, he gave me weird vibes. However, I didn't understand the danger signals, and while he made me uncomfortable, he didn't set off my parents' alarm bells, so he was allowed to stay. Acquaintance also gave him my number, as I did have my own cell phone at the time to contact my very few friends. He started calling constantly, wanting to talk about everything and things I didn't get. At first, I again humored it, but I have always been the type of mouth-off when I'm displeased. When he started to talk about women's breasts, I became extremely uncomfortable and hung up on him. From what I recollect, afterwards, he called back and then asked me angrily why I'd done that. I was back then honest to a fault and told him exactly why. He got upset and hung up himself, leaving me confused. He'd come almost every other day to our house, and my parents finally started to notice his constant presence as a little suspicious. He'd always come asking to see me, but when my mother refused, he'd get angry and ask if I was hiding from him on purpose. It would take my dad telling him to go home that would make him leave, but somehow, I'm unsure why, he was allowed to visit me a few more times. Other behaviors made me uncomfortable, like him giving me small, cheap trinkets like dollar store candy and jewelry. I always accepted, again being gullible and having respect drilled into me. And you can guess, he did show up to a 4-H volunteer activity that I hadn't told him about and my church twice. Of course, at the junior-senior high school that my friend and he mutually attended, I was homeschooled. He bragged to his friends about how I was his girlfriend, and he was waiting to get me alone so he could have his way with me. He even harassed my younger sister, who was 8 at the time, to tell him where I was or if I was at home, if he caught her outside or playing with the neighborhood kids. I knew none of that was going on until years later, not that I would have understood. I was again only 12 and he was 16, and he took advantage of that. He went out for a walk one of the last times he ever visited. I was moving soon, so luckily I wouldn't have to see him again. It was late and he started talking about relations and intimacy, but this time it was about his own personal life. I didn't get half of what he said, but I understood now that he, to be blunt, was implying that I should participate in that with him. I said no, of course, and he got angry and just completely lost it. He said a few things I honestly couldn't say what, as that part is erased from my mind, but as I recall, what he did next was punch a tree in anger. He then went on to say things along the lines of how I wasn't being a good girlfriend to him and how he'd make it worth my while, and finally the kicker, my parents are moving away because he's not a Christian and they won't let us be together. I still can't figure out whether he believed any of that or was just saying it to guilt me into doing whatever he wanted. I obviously was scared of his outbursts. When he asked again if I'd do it, I started to scream at him. I basically said that he was gross and hated everything about him, and I was only nice to him because it was my Christianly duty. He went about as red as a beet, and yeah, you can guess he was ready to beat the crap out of me. I didn't give him a chance. I was still smart enough to do something about it. I kicked him in the legs and stormed off home. By some miracle, he didn't pursue me. Guess I was too much work to subdue, or he was in shock. Either way, a week later I thankfully never heard him again, and even more thankfully had my cell phone stolen a few days after our move. He did try to contact me in that window. He sent texts threatening to come after me, and we could be together. The poor sucker who stole my phone probably had to deal with whatever other calls or texts he sent. To conclude this story, over the years I learned that Levi was a juvenile delinquent and had gotten into trouble for threatening to beat up classmates, harassing them, and to the females inappropriately grabbing them. He never graduated high school, dropped out, went on to having many relationships, all ending badly. One girl even had to get a restraining order because, apparently, he threatened to mutilate her after she broke up with him. This, of course, was rumor and word of mouth from friends, so I'm unsure what's true. But based on my own experience, I have a sinking feeling it's all very real. So last week I was backing into a parking spot in an unfamiliar townhouse neighborhood. My girlfriend was dog-sitting and I was visiting, and I caught my quarter panel on this older SUV, like early 2000s model. Car gets stuck, have to make the scrape worse to get out, basically the sigh moment. So like a decent human being, I call my insurance, file a claim, leave a note explaining the bumper scruff with my phone number. Guy waits until late the next day, texts me giving his name and asking for my name and address. I don't leave my name on notes in public, a phone number is generally fine, and lets me know he's going to call me. Most of that seemed fine except that he didn't need my address, so I replied with my name, policy number, insurance company, and claim number so that he could get his car fixed. Again, minor scrape that took the chrome off the corner of his bumper and nothing else, not even a dent. So he replies asking if I lived in the neighborhood, and I told him no, I was just visiting. No response. Cool. There are a lot of federal intelligence and R&D employees and contractors in this area, so privacy is a pretty normal thing. A lot of people will just reply analyst when you ask what they do, which is code for stop asking about that. So he calls me, I pick up, we chat. He pressures me to do out of pocket, saying things like, "Oh, if you keep making claims, they'll raise your rates and even drop you." Thanks for the advice, but my last claim was comprehensive like 8 years ago, and I think I'm fine. At this point, I'm glad I sent pictures to my insurance co. and had a text exchange so I have things in writing. So then he's like, "Yeah, so I looked you up online and got your address and like your last 3 addresses, so I should have what I need." Now I'm creeped out. Dude, I scuffed your bumper. I didn't break into your house. You don't need to know where I live. You need my insurance information, you've got it. Leave me alone. So Friday rolls around, and someone I know was shot and died Thursday afternoon, and I attended their vigil in the afternoon on Friday. Obviously, I'm not in any mood to deal with this crap, and again, he already has my information. Dude calls me again, leaves an incomprehensible voicemail and text saying, "Just called you," during the vigil. Thankfully, I remembered to silence my phone. He texts me again with, "By the way, who were you visiting?" a few hours later. I blocked his number. He can call my insurance. This is way overboard for a scuffed bumper on a 15-plus-year-old car that I'm admitting fault for. Who knows what his intentions were? Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit r/letsreadofficial and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear it featured here on the channel. And if you want to support the page even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.